Welcome back to True Crime XX. Today, we're unraveling some of the most mysterious unsolved cases. Get ready for stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Let's dive in. Welcome to True Crime Cases, where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Today's episode unravels a tale of woman discovers her boyfriend's horrifying secret ends in grisly murder. In the picturesque town, the vibrant art scene, historic architecture, and breathtaking natural beauty attracted both tourists and those seeking a quieter life away from the bustle of larger cities. It was here that 29-year-old Betty Armstrong thought she had found her perfect slice of paradise. Little did she know that beneath the charming exterior of her seemingly idyllic life, a dark and sinister secret was lurking, one that would shatter her world and end in a horrifying act of violence. Betty, talented graphic designer with fiery red hair and a creative spirit, had moved to Asheville 3 years ago from the busy streets of Atlanta. She had left behind a high-pressure job at a large marketing firm, seeking a more balanced life and the inspiration she found in the mountain. With her skills and portfolio, Betty quickly established herself as a freelance designer, working with local businesses and artists to create stunning visuals that captured the essence of Asheville's unique culture. It was at the annual Asheville Art in the Park event that Betty first crossed paths with Lucas Johnson. Tall, with dark hair and striking green eyes, Lucas seemed to embody the rugged charm of the mountains themselves. 34, he presented himself as a successful wildlife photographer, his work showcasing the raw beauty of the Appalachian wilderness. Their connection was immediate and intense, sparked by a shared love of nature and creativity. For the first year and a half of their relationship, everything seemed perfect. Lucas was attentive, passionate, and supportive of Betty's career. He would surprise her with impromptu picnics in the beautiful Pisgah National Forest, and they spent countless evenings discussing art and their dreams for the future. Betty's friends, particularly her best friend and fellow designer, Mia Chen, were thrilled to see her so happy and settled in her new life. However, as their relationship progressed, Betty began to notice subtle changes in Lucas's behavior. He became more secretive, often disappearing for days at a time on what he claimed were photography expeditions. When he returned, he was sometimes moody and withdrawn, brushing off Betty's concerns with vague explanations about the pressures of his work. Betty tried to ignore the growing sense of unease that gnawed at her. She threw herself into her design project, taking on more clients and even beginning to teach evening classes at a local art studio. Her work, always impressive, took on a new depth as she channeled her conflicting emotions into her creations. It was on a crisp autumn evening, as the trees in the mountains began to display their vibrant fall colors, that Betty's world began to unravel. She had been working late at her home studio, putting the finishing touches on a branding project for a new eco-friendly resort. Stretching after hours hunched over her computer, Betty decided to surprise Lucas by joining him on one of his night photography sessions in the nearby mountain. As she drove along the winding roads of the Blue Ridge Parkway, the beauty of the starlit sky above contrasted sharply with the growing sense of dread in her heart. She had tried calling Lucas several times. His phone went straight to voicemail. This wasn't unusual when he was working. Something about tonight felt different. Betty pulled into the small parking area near one of Lucas's favorite overlooks. His car was there, but there was no sign of him or his photography equipment. The quiet of the mountains, usually so peaceful, now felt oppressive and foreboding. With growing apprehension, Betty took out her flashlight and began to search the area. The beam of light danced across the underbrush, casting eerie shadows. It was then that she noticed something reflecting in the bushes just off the trail. As she moved closer, her blood ran cold. There, partially hidden by the foliage, was a woman's bracelet, one that looked disturbingly similar to a piece she had admired in a local artisan's shop just last week. Her hands shaking, Betty reached out to examine the bracelet. As she did, she heard a twig snap behind her. Whirling around, she found herself face to face with Lucas. His expression, usually so warm and inviting, was now cold and unrecognizable in the harsh glare of the flashlight. "You shouldn't be here, Betty," Lucas said, his voice low and dangerous. The shock of his tone, so at odds with the man she thought she knew, sent Betty stumbling backward. In that moment, she realized that the person standing before her was a complete stranger. What happened next was a blur of terror and adrenaline. Betty turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest as she fled through the dark woods. Behind her, she could hear Lucas in pursuit, his footsteps crashing through the underbrush. She ran without direction, driven by pure survival instinct, until she found herself at the edge of a steep ravine. With nowhere left to run, Betty turned to face her pursuer. Lucas emerged from the shadows, his face contorted with a mix of anger and something that looked almost like regret. "I never wanted you to find out," he said, taking a step closer. "You've ruined everything." In that moment, as Betty stood on the precipice between safety and an unimaginable fate intervened. The sound of approaching vehicles broke through the night air. Park rangers on their nightly patrol. Lucas, startled by the noise, hesitated for a split second. It was all the time Betty needed. She turned and scrambled down the steep embankment, using roots and rocks to control her descent. By the time Lucas had disappeared back into the woods, and Betty had made her way to the ranger station, she was in a state of shock. The rangers, alarmed by her appearance and fragmented case, immediately called in the Asheville Police Department. The events that unfolded in the following days would shake the peaceful community of Asheville to its core. As Betty recounted her terrifying experience to Detective Sarah Hawthorne, a seasoned investigator with the Asheville PD, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Detective Hawthorne, a no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s with sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing, listened intently to Betty's case. Her years of experience told her that there was more to this case than a simple domestic dispute or a photographer's eccentricities. "Ms. Armstrong," Detective Hawthorne said, her voice gentle but firm, "I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything you can about Lucas. How you met, his work, his friends. Anything that might help us understand what happened last night." As Betty delved into the details of her relationship with Lucas, Detective Hawthorne's suspicions grew. The picture Betty painted of Lucas Johnson, charming, successful, with a portfolio of stunning wildlife photos, didn't match any records the police had on file. In fact, there seemed to be no official record of a Lucas Johnson matching his description in the entire state of North Carolina. The investigation that followed would uncover a web of lies so intricate and disturbing that it would haunt Betty and the entire Asheville community for years to come. Detective Hawthorne and her team began by searching Lucas's apartment. What they found was shocking. Hidden behind a false wall in the closet was a small room filled with computer equipment, multiple cell phones, and stacks of documents. Among the papers were several passports, each bearing Lucas's photo, but with different names and nationalities. As the police dug deeper, they discovered that Lucas Johnson was just the latest in a series of identities assumed by a man whose real name was Adrian Holbrook. Adrian had a criminal record spanning multiple states, with charges ranging from fraud and identity theft to suspected involvement in the disappearances of several young women over the past decade. The bracelet Betty had found in the woods turned out to be a crucial piece of evidence. It belonged to Melissa Delaney, a 25-year-old tourist from Ohio who had gone missing 3 weeks earlier while hiking in the Pisgah National Forest. Melissa's disappearance had been treated as a tragic accident, a hiker lost in the vast wilderness. Now it took on a much more sinister aspect. As news of the investigation broke, the peaceful community of Asheville was thrown into a state of shock and fear. The idea that a predator had been living among them, posing as a celebrated local artist, was almost too much to bear. The Asheville Citizen-Times ran daily updates on the case, and local TV stations featured nightly segments on the hunt for Adrian Holbrook. For Betty, the revelations about Lucas, or Adrian, were devastating. She struggled to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the monster revealed by the investigation. Nights were plagued by nightmares, and she jumped at every shadow, convinced that Adrian was lurking around every corner. Betty's friend Mia became her rock during this turbulent time. Mia moved in with Betty, providing both emotional support and an extra measure of security. Together, they went through Betty's belongings, looking for any clue that might help the investigation. It was during one of these sessions that they made a chilling discovery. Hidden in the back of a drawer was a memory card that Lucas had given Betty months ago, claiming it contained photos from one of his exhibitions. When they viewed the contents on Betty's computer, they were horrified to find not wildlife photos, but images of women. Some seemed to be candid shots taken without the subject's knowledge, while others were much more disturbing. Betty immediately turned the memory card over to Detective Hawthorne. The photos provided vital clues, allowing the police to identify several more of Adrian's potential victims. The case was no longer just about a single predator, but a series of crimes that spanned years and crossed state lines. As the investigation expanded, the FBI became involved. Special Agent Marcus Reeves, a veteran agent specializing in serial offenders, was brought in to assist the Asheville PD. Agent Reeves, a tall African-American man with a commanding presence and a reputation for solving seemingly unsolvable cases, brought a new level of resources and expertise to the hunt for Adrian Holbrook. "This man is a chameleon," Agent Reeves explained during a briefing with local law enforcement. He spent years perfecting the art of blending in, of becoming whoever he needs to be to gain his victims' trust. But everyone slips up eventually. Our job is to be there when he does. The investigation took on a new urgency when another woman went missing. Emily Sutton, 30-year-old librarian, disappeared after leaving work, Pack Memorial Library in downtown Asheville. Security footage showed her getting into a car with a man who, though his face was not clearly visible, matched Adrian's build and description. The disappearance of Emily Sutton sent shockwaves through the community. The fear that had been simmering since the revelation of Adrian's true identity now boiled over into near panic. Women in Asheville began traveling in groups, and sales of personal safety devices skyrocketed. The vibrant nightlife of the city, usually so lively, grew subdued as people hurried home before dark. Betty, racked with guilt over Emily's disappearance, threw herself into helping the investigation. She worked with a police sketch artist to create a detailed portrait of Adrian, which was distributed throughout the Southeast. She also appeared on local and national news programs, sharing her case in the hope that it might prevent other women from falling victim to Adrian's charm. The pressure of the investigation and the constant media attention began to take its toll on Betty. She lost weight, struggled to sleep, and found it difficult to concentrate on her work. The vibrant, creative woman she had once been seemed to be fading away, replaced by someone haunted and afraid. It was Mia who finally convinced Betty to seek help. "You can't let him take your life away," Mia insisted, her voice filled with concern. "You survived, Betty. Now you need to learn to live again." With Mia's encouragement, Betty began seeing Dr. Rebecca Thornton, a therapist specializing in trauma and PTSD. Dr. Thornton, a warm maternal woman in her 50s, helped Betty begin to process the complex emotions surrounding her experience. Through their sessions, Betty started to regain her sense of self and to understand that she was not responsible for Adrian's actions. As Betty worked on her healing, the investigation continued. Agent Reeves and Detective Hawthorne worked tirelessly, following every lead, no matter how small. They interviewed former colleagues, analyzed financial records, and combed through hours of security footage from businesses across Asheville and neighboring towns. Their break came from an unexpected source. A hiker in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, about 70 miles southwest of Asheville, reported seeing a man matching Adrian's description near one of the park's more remote campsites. The hiker, an off-duty park ranger, had recognized Adrian from the widely circulated sketch. Law enforcement mobilized quickly, setting up a perimeter around the area where Adrian had been spotted. As dawn broke over the mountains, teams of FBI agents and local police began a systematic search of the rugged terrain. It was mid-afternoon when they finally cornered Adrian near a steep cliff overlooking a river gorge. The man they found bore little resemblance to the charming photographer Betty had known. His hair was long and unkempt, his clothes dirty and torn. But his eyes, when he turned to face the approaching officers, still held the same cold, calculating look that had chilled Betty to her core that night on the mountain. What happened next would be debated for years to come. As agents closed in, Adrian, instead of surrendering, took a step backward toward the cliff edge. Whether he lost his footing or made a deliberate choice was never clear. In a matter of seconds, he disappeared over the edge, plunging into the churning waters of the river below. The news of Adrian's death brought a complex mix of emotions for Betty and the community of Asheville. There was relief that the immediate threat was over, but also frustration that Adrian had escaped facing justice for his crimes. For the families of his victims, particularly those whose loved ones were still missing, the lack of closure was devastating. In the weeks that followed, as the FBI searched the area where Adrian had been camping, a grim picture of his activities emerged. They found evidence linking him to the disappearances of at least 7 women across 4 states. Among his possessions was a journal that provided horrifying details of his crimes, along with plans for future attacks. The journal also revealed the twisted logic behind Adrian's actions. He saw himself as a predator, superior to his victims, and took pride in his ability to manipulate and deceive. The entries provided valuable insights for law enforcement and psychologists studying serial offenders, but for Betty, they only deepened the trauma of her experience. As the case came to its conclusion, Betty found herself at a crossroads. The life she had built in Asheville now seemed tainted by her memories of Adrian. Every familiar street and beloved hiking trail held the potential for triggering flashback. After much soul-searching and long conversations with Mia and Dr. Thornton, Betty made the difficult decision: leave Asheville. "I need a fresh start," she explained to Detective Hawthorne during their final meeting. "Somewhere I can redefine myself without the shadow of this hanging over me." Detective Hawthorne, who had come to admire Betty's resilience over the course of the investigation, understood. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, Betty," she said, her usually stern expression softening. "I have no doubt you'll thrive wherever you go." Betty chose to move to Portland, Oregon, a city whose vibrant art scene and progressive culture had always intrigued her. The move was both an ending and a beginning, a chance to close the chapter on her traumatic experience in Asheville and start writing a new case for herself. In Portland, Betty slowly began to rebuild her life. She found a job with a small design firm that specialized in eco-friendly branding, allowing her to combine her creative skills with her love of nature. She also became involved with a support group for survivors of violent crimes, finding solace and strength in sharing her case with others who understood her experience. Back in Asheville, the impact of Adrian Holbrook's crimes continued to resonate. The case sparked important conversations about personal safety and the need for better resources for law enforcement to track serial offenders across state lines. The Asheville Police Department, under Detective Hawthorne's guidance, implemented new training programs to help officers recognize signs of predatory behavior. Mia's decision to become a victim advocate was a profound shift, but one that felt deeply meaningful after witnessing Betty's struggle. She enrolled in a specialized program and threw herself into her studies, determined to provide the kind of support and guidance that Betty had needed during her darkest moments. As Mia navigated her own path forward, the community of Asheville also worked to heal. A memorial garden was established in the heart of downtown, a serene oasis dedicated to the memory of Adrian's victim. Locals and visitors alike would come to the garden to reflect, leave flowers, and to find a sense of peace amidst the lingering trauma. The Asheville Citizen-Times continued to follow the aftermath of the case, providing updates on the ongoing search for the remains of the missing women. Investigators combed through Adrian's journal and other evidence, painstakingly piecing together his movements and crimes over the past decade. It was a grim task, but one driven by a determination to provide closure for the families involved. For Betty, the move to Portland offered a chance to rebuild her life. the scars of her experience remained. She found solace in her work, pouring her creativity into branding projects that celebrated the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest. Her designs, once whimsical and carefree, now carried an undercurrent of resilience and depth. In the evenings, Betty would venture out into the lush forests surrounding Portland, finding solace in the quiet solitude of the trails. It was during these moments, surrounded by the towering firs and the songs of birds, that she felt a sense of peace begin to return. The mountains of Asheville had once been a source of joy. Now they held only the weight of her traumatic memories. Slowly, with the help of her support group and the care of Dr. Thornton, who had agreed to continue their sessions via video chat, Betty began to reclaim her life. She started dating again, tentatively at first, learning to trust her instincts and not to be defined by the past. The vibrant, creative spirit that had drawn Lucas, or rather Adrian, to her in the first place began to re-emerge, though tempered with a newfound caution and self-awareness. Back in Asheville, Mia's work as a victim advocate had a profound impact on the community. She helped establish support groups, organized self-defense workshops, and lobbied for better resources for survivors of violent crimes. Her tireless efforts did not go unnoticed, and she was eventually recognized with a prestigious award from the state's Attorney General's office. As the years passed, the case of Adrian Holbrook became a cautionary tale, studied by law enforcement agencies and criminology students across the country. Served as a stark reminder of the dangers of deception and the importance of trusting one's instinct. Betty's case, in particular, became a symbol of resilience and survival, inspiring others who had endured similar traumas. For Betty, the journey of healing was an ongoing process, with good days and bad. There were times when the memories would resurface, vivid and overwhelming, and she would find herself transported back to that fateful night on the mountain. But with each passing year, the shadows grew a little dimmer, and the light of her new life in Portland began to shine a little brighter. It was in those moments, surrounded by the beauty of her new home, that Betty would think of the friends and community she had left behind in Asheville. She knew that, while the scars of her experience would never fully fade, the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself had the power to transform even the darkest of tragedies into something remarkable. As Betty stood on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the distant peaks of the Cascade Mountains, she made a silent vow. She would never forget the lessons she had learned, nor the lives that had been lost. Instead, she would honor their memory by living her life to the fullest, by embracing the joy and wonder that the world had to offer. In the end, the case of Betty Armstrong and Adrian Holbrook was not just one of horror and heartbreak, but also of hope and the indomitable power of the human spirit. It was a testament to the resilience of a community, the courage of a survivor, and the enduring belief that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, the light always find a way to shine through. As we reach the conclusion of this harrowing tale, we are left with a chilling reminder of the depths of human darkness. A case of how a woman's life was shattered upon discovering her boyfriend's horrifying secret is one that resonates with the fragility of trust and the unseen dangers that often lurk behind closed doors. It is a case that leaves us questioning the very nature of evil and the lengths to which a person can go to hide their true self. In this case, the initial stages of the relationship appeared to be like any other, a whirlwind of romance, passion, and dreams of a shared future. But beneath the surface, something far more sinister was brewing. The man she loved, the person she believed she knew, harbored a darkness that would ultimately lead to a gruesome and tragic end. As the relationship progressed, subtle signs began to emerge. Odd behaviors, unexplained absences, and an increasing sense of unease took hold. But like many, she dismissed these red flags, attributing them to stress or the complexities of a growing relationship. It is a common narrative, how we often ignore the warning signs because we want to believe in the goodness of those we love. But as the saying goes, the truth will out. When the horrifying secret was finally revealed, It was far worse than she could have ever imagined. The shock and disbelief that followed were quickly replaced by a profound sense of dread and fear for her own safety. The man she had shared her life with was not who he seemed to be. He was a monster hiding in plain sight, and the revelation of his true nature set off a chain of events that would end in murder. The details of the murder itself are almost too gruesome to recount. The brutality and violence of the act speak to the sheer desperation and malice that had been festering within him. It was an explosion of rage and a cold-blooded attempt to silence the truth that had been uncovered. But as with many such cases, the attempt to cover up his crime only led to further evidence of his guilt. The aftermath of the murder was a bleak and heart-wrenching period for those who knew the victim. The shockwaves rippled through the community, leaving a trail of grief, confusion, and unanswered questions. How could this have happened? How could someone so seemingly ordinary commit such a heinous act? Questions were endless, and the answers were elusive. The investigation that followed was thorough and relentless. Law enforcement officials worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading up to the murder, and the evidence against the perpetrator began to mount. His attempts to evade justice were futile, and it was only a matter of time before the full extent of his crimes was brought to light. The trial was a painful process for everyone involved. The courtroom became a place where the darkest aspects of human nature were laid bare for all to see. Prosecution presented a damning case, detailing the premeditation and savagery of the murder. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to paint a picture of a man who had lost control, but the overwhelming evidence left little room for doubt. As the jury deliberated, the weight of the case was felt by all. There was a palpable tension in the air, a collective holding of breath as everyone waited for the verdict. When it finally came, the words guilty echoed through the courtroom, bringing a sense of closure, albeit a hollow one. Justice had been served. The scars left behind would never fully heal. In reflecting on this case, we are reminded of the importance of vigilance and the need to trust our instincts. The signs of danger are often there, hidden in plain sight, and it is crucial that we pay attention to them. This case also serves as a stark reminder of the lengths to which some individuals will go to conceal their true nature. It is a sobering thought that the person we believe we know best could be hiding the darkest of secrets. As we close this chapter, we must also remember the victim, a life cut short by senseless violence. Her case is one of tragedy, but it is also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable horror, there is a strength that endures. It is in her memory that we share this case, hoping that it serves as a warning and a lesson to others. In the world of true crime, there are often no happy endings. Reality of these stories is that they are rooted in pain and suffering. But by telling them, we honor the victims and keep their stories alive. We shed light on the darkness, and in doing so, hope to prevent such tragedies from occurring in the future. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of a case that has undoubtedly left a mark on all who have heard it. Your support and engagement are what allow us to continue bringing these stories to light. We hope that this case has not only informed you, but also moved you to think critically about the world around us and the people we let into our lives. As we continue to delve into the world of true crime, we invite you to join us for future cases. Each case is a journey into the unknown, a deep dive into the human psyche, and a testament to the complexities of life and death. We are committed to uncovering the truth, no matter how dark or disturbing it may be. In closing, we ask you to take a moment to reflect on the case you've just heard. Think about the lives that were forever changed by these events, and the lessons that can be learned from them. True crime is not just about the macabre details. It is about understanding the human condition, recognizing the signs of danger, and ultimately, finding justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your continued support. We look forward to bringing you more stories in the future, stories that challenge, inform, and above all, remind us of the preciousness of life. Until then, stay safe, stay vigilant, And remember that the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried, will always find its way to the surface. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope these stories brought you some thrilling and intense moments. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit like, share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another unsolved mystery. Leave a comment below about which case intrigued you the most, and feel free to suggest any cases you'd like me to cover in the future. See you in the next video.